In August 2021, Hannah Pettey began feeling unwell. She was only 21 years old, married to Brian Mann, a chiropractor, and mother to two young children, Lincoln and Gracie. The pain started in her abdomen and grew steadily worse. Nausea became constant. She lost weight rapidly. By November, the symptoms had intensified to the point where even basic tasks became difficult. Hannah spent most of her time in bed, too weak to walk without support. She rolled around the house in an office chair because standing was nearly impossible. Brian noticed the weight loss and suggested she see a specialist, but Hannah hesitated. On bad days, her mother, Nicole Pettey, would ask if she needed a doctor, and Hannah would insist she was fine. Most of the time, the pain would ease temporarily, only to return worse than before. By January 2022, Hannah's condition had deteriorated so severely that she could no longer care for her children. Her skin had turned a deep yellow, a sign that something inside her body was failing. Nicole grew increasingly alarmed. On January 18th, she called Hannah, and what she heard on the other end of the line filled her with dread. Hannah could barely speak. She gasped instead of forming words. Finally, she managed to ask her mother to take her to the hospital. Brian was at work, so Nicole rushed over and drove Hannah to UABV, the hospital at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. The drive was fast and frantic. Nicole prayed the entire way. At the emergency room, they waited 10 hours. Hannah sat in a chair, her body skeletal, her eyes sunken. A doctor examined her and said she was very sick, but that her vitals were stable. He told Nicole he wanted to keep Hannah for observation, but that the hospital likely would not allow it. Nicole responded that if they sent her daughter home, she would die. Moments later, Hannah suffered a violent seizure. Her body jerked uncontrollably. Foam formed at her mouth. Her eyes moved back and forth without stopping. In the chaos, she tore off her hospital gown. Nicole saw her daughter's body for the first time in months. Hannah was skin and bones. She was starving to death. Hannah lost consciousness. The seizure was so severe that doctors placed her in a medical coma. Nicole texted Brian to inform him of what had happened. She explained that Hannah had seized and had not regained consciousness. She said Hannah might be out all day. So Brian did not respond. Nicole never heard back from him. Later, Brian learned about Hannah's condition from his own mother, who had been in contact with Nicole. He arranged for childcare and began the drive to the hospital. When Brian arrived around 9:30 that night, he was not allowed inside. COVID restrictions permitted only one visitor at a time, and Nicole was in the room with Hannah. Brian stood outside for a long time, frustrated and irritated. Eventually, Nicole came out and Brian went in. He saw Hannah lying in the hospital bed, unconscious and barely recognizable. He was shocked but relieved that she was finally receiving medical attention. For nearly 48 hours, Hannah remained unconscious. Nicole stayed by her side, leaving only when hospital rules required her to switch with Brian. On one of those visits, Nicole leaned over her daughter, kissed her head, and whispered that she loved her. Hannah's eyes opened. She said she loved her mother too. Nurses rushed to her side, amazed. Hannah asked if she had not been talking. She had no memory of the past 2 days, but Hannah's struggle was far from over. Fluid had built up inside her brain, and doctors had to drain it. They paralyzed her body to prevent any movement that could cause death. The situation seemed hopeless. Nicole was told that even if Hannah survived, she would likely suffer permanent brain damage and never be able to function normally again. 8 days after Hannah was admitted, a neurologist approached Nicole with devastating news. Hannah had been poisoned. Tests revealed an astronomical amount of lead inside her body. Her colon was so packed with lead that there was almost no room left for anything else. Lead had settled into her bones and organs. The levels were so extreme that doctors had never encountered a case like it. They told Nicole there was no way Hannah could have ingested that much lead by accident. Someone had been poisoning her deliberately. This was attempted murder. The hospital immediately reported the case to the Department of Human Resources, the state agency responsible for protecting vulnerable adults. Hannah was moved to a secluded room with security at the door. Nicole and Brian were told to leave. They were no longer allowed to see Hannah because both were considered potential suspects. Nicole was devastated. She had fought to keep her daughter alive, and now she was being forced to leave her. Brian, on the other hand, was angry. He immediately suspected Nicole. He believed she was trying to cause problems and point fingers at him. Brian had never liked Nicole. Throughout his marriage to Hannah, he avoided her completely. He never attended family gatherings or holidays. He refused to interact with her. Nicole had not seen Brian once during the years he was married to her daughter. Brian claimed that Nicole had been cruel to Hannah, constantly criticizing her appearance and making her feel inadequate. He said Hannah had told him that her mother would ask why she did not wear makeup or question what she was eating. Brian could not understand why Hannah wanted Nicole in her life and when he asked, Hannah would only say that Nicole was her mom. Hannah had moved out of her mother's home in June 2017, the month she turned 18. She got her own apartment shortly after graduating high school. That same month, she met Brian. He was 29 years old and owned his own chiropractic practice. Hannah was immediately attracted to him. He was charming, good-looking, and attentive. Their relationship moved quickly. Within weeks, Brian told his friends that Hannah was the one. They thought he was moving too fast. She was only 18 and pregnant within months. Brian proposed after Valentine's Day. He was nervous. He took marriage seriously. Hannah was nervous too. She had begun to notice that Brian could be controlling, but she convinced herself it would be fine. On her wedding day in May 2018, Hannah expressed doubts to her friends. She had cold feet. Her friends told her repeatedly that she did not have to go through with it. If she was uncertain, she could walk away. In the end, Hannah smiled and married Brian. Their life together had good moments and bad. Hannah admitted they got into physical fights. She downplayed the severity, insisting it was not all the time. Even the birth of their son was marked by conflict. Hannah was 9 months pregnant and had started bleeding. At the hospital, Brian became furious. He yelled at her, saying she should not have been walking in the heat. Nurses noticed his behavior and gave Hannah a safe word to use if she needed them to intervene. She never used it. Over time, Hannah said things improved. Brian became sweeter and more supportive, especially when she started getting sick. He seemed genuinely concerned, but now, as she lay in a hospital bed poisoned with lead, suspicion fell directly on him. Nicole remembered something Hannah had mentioned months earlier. Brian gave Hannah supplements every night. He placed capsules on her nightstand and insisted she take them. Nicole had not thought much of it at the time because Brian was a chiropractor and supplements seemed normal. But when doctors kept asking what Hannah had been ingesting, Nicole told them about the capsules. Doctors repeatedly asked Brian to bring in the supplements. He never did. Instead, he provided a photograph of common over-the-counter vitamins. Lieutenant Alan McDearmond of the Hartselle Police Department was brought into the case. He was told that someone had been attempting to kill Hannah and that Brian was the primary suspect. McDearmond was skeptical at first. He needed evidence. McDearmond asked Brian if he could search his home. Brian agreed. They went through the house together, looking at pills, makeup, and anything Hannah might have ingested. Brian provided a bottle of supplements and a laxative he said Hannah had taken. The children were removed from the home and placed with Brian's parents. Brian was allowed supervised visitation. McDearmond went to see Hannah at the hospital. She was still in a coma. Doctors showed him her x-rays. Her entire body was lit up from the lead reacting to the imaging. It was shocking. McDearmond had never seen anything like it. He asked Brian to come in for further questioning. Brian refused to cooperate any further. On February 1st, McDearmond cleared Nicole. She was allowed to visit Hannah again. He had concluded that Nicole's behavior matched that of a concerned mother. Brian's behavior, on the other hand, did not match that of a concerned husband. McDearmond admitted this was not hard evidence, but it guided his instincts. Tests conducted at Brian and Hannah's home came back negative. No lead was found. No tainted capsules were discovered. No evidence of lead being scraped or ground into powder was recovered. It was a significant hole in the theory, but McDearmond kept looking. In mid-February, Hannah began to recover. McDearmond visited her and asked if she had any idea who might have poisoned her. She said no. He asked if she had tried to harm herself. She said no. Hannah was coherent at times and confused at others. She hallucinated, saying she saw people coming out of the walls. Doctors warned that even if she survived, she would likely never regain full cognitive function. They told McDearmond not to rely on her as a witness, but Hannah surprised everyone. She grew stronger each day. Nurses close to her age reminded her that she had children waiting for her. The mention of her kids gave Hannah strength. She told herself she would get better and go home to them. On March 3rd, after nearly 2 months in the hospital, Hannah was discharged. She went to her mother's house, reunited with her children, and filed for divorce. But friends were worried. Hannah was still in contact with Brian. 1 week after leaving the hospital, Hannah met Brian at their former home. She was emotional and cried throughout the night. She needed to hear him deny the accusations directly. She wanted him to say there was no way he could have done it. Brian never gave her that reassurance. Incredibly, Hannah called her attorney and said she did not want to proceed with the divorce. She told McDearmond she wanted him to drop the investigation. She insisted Brian loved her and their children and that it made no sense for him to have poisoned her. McDearmond understood. Victims of domestic violence often forgive their abusers. He prepared a form and asked Hannah to sign it. He explained that if Brian killed her in the future, he could show the form to prove she had not wanted to pursue the case. Hannah refused to sign it. She told him to keep investigating. Hannah ultimately decided to proceed with the divorce and cooperate with the investigation. She told McDearmond about life insurance policies Brian had taken out on her while they were still dating. She also learned that while she was in the hospital fighting for her life, Brian had tried to take out additional policies. If approved, he would have collected more than $5 million upon her death. Money was a motive. McDearmond received an unexpected call from Danny Hill, a contractor who had worked on Brian's chiropractic office. Danny had lined the x-ray room with sheets of soft lead, a standard safety measure. After seeing Brian's name in a newspaper article about his arrest, Danny contacted McDearmond. He explained that after the job was finished, Brian told him he would dispose of the leftover lead himself. This information gave investigators probable cause to search Brian's office. They obtained a warrant and removed a section of lead from the x-ray room so that the lead was thin and soft enough to be scraped into tiny shavings, just like pencil shavings. Those shavings could easily be placed into empty capsules. In September 2022, Brian was arrested and charged with attempted murder. He pleaded not guilty and was released on a $500,000 bond. He was required to report to jail every weekend and wear an ankle monitor. Brian's trial began in June 2025. He walked into the Decatur, Alabama courthouse facing a possible life sentence. Lead prosecutor Garrick Vickery argued that Brian had made a calculated decision to slowly poison Hannah over months to collect life insurance money and rid himself of his wife. Brian's defense attorney, Chad Morgan, argued that there was no direct evidence. No lead-filled capsules had been found. Hannah was the first witness. She walked into the courtroom and looked at Brian. She no longer saw the man she had fallen in love with. She testified that Brian gave her vitamin capsules every night. Even when she was in unbearable pain and too nauseous to swallow, he insisted she take them. One night, she told him she could not keep anything down. He became agitated and told her she had to take the vitamins. The defense suggested that Nicole could have been the one poisoning Hannah. They claimed Nicole brought Hannah milkshakes that could have been laced with lead. Hannah denied this. She said she did not even like milkshakes. Prosecutors argued that Hannah would have tasted lead if it had been mixed into food. Capsules were the only method that made sense. Hannah also revealed something she had been holding back. Doctors told her she could no longer have children. She was only 22 years old when she learned this. The damage from the poisoning was irreversible. Nicole took the stand and was questioned about her relationship with Hannah. She remained calm. She had not poisoned her daughter. After a day and a half and 7 witnesses, the state rested its case. The defense called no witnesses. The jury deliberated and returned a verdict. Guilty. Brian showed a moment of shock. One juror described him as a monster. He said it took arrogance to watch someone waste away and do nothing. And Hannah stepped out of the courtroom and cried. It was a release of everything she had been holding in. Brian was sentenced to life in prison in August 2025. Hannah, who had been expected to suffer permanent brain damage, graduated from college with a teaching degree. She moved back into the home she once shared with Brian. She repainted and redecorated. She filled it with pictures of herself and her children. She made it theirs. This